Hi everyone. I think it's about time I do a proper rock tumbling tutorial. I mean, I've got so many videos of all the rocks that I tumbled, I might as well show my process of how I did it, right? Alright, so before we begin, we have to talk about a few things. The first thing is just, I'm gonna warn you straight up, this is gonna take a really long time. Probably several months. Now, it's really tough if you're a beginner and brand new to this. I've been there, like that first few months while you're just waiting for enough rocks to finish a batch is just feels like it's never gonna end, but it's worth the time that it takes. And I think that's the biggest key to getting a really, really great shine on your rocks. The other thing that we should really talk about is the rocks themselves, because not every rock can just be thrown in the rock tumbler and it'll come out shiny. You really want harder rocks, somewhere between like 6 and 7 on the Mohs scale. So that's going to be like your quartz, agates, jaspers, that sort of thing. And I'm lucky enough to live in central Minnesota where we've got lots of varieties of jasper, we've got lots of quartz, got lots of beautiful Lake Superior agates. I mean, I've got a good selection of stuff, I've got a good selection of stuff to work with. If you don't have such a great selection, I would recommend purchasing some rocks. You can get some, I've ordered a lot from the Rock Shed. That's also where I get all of my grit and ceramic media. We'll talk about ceramic media in a bit. But yeah, they're a good company. They have reasonable prices. If I were to recommend a beginner rock, I'd probably recommend maybe Montana agates. They're pretty inexpensive. I think they're like $6 or $7 a pound. And they look nice. And they're pretty easy to get a good shine on. Now the rock that I chose for this tutorial is Lake Superior agates. Like I said, agates are usually a pretty good bet for getting a good shine, but Lake Superior agates do offer a few more challenges than some of the other ones, mostly because they're really old. Lake Superior agates are about 1 billion years old, give or take. And through that time, they've been through a lot, especially the ones kind of in my area, because they were brought there by glaciers. And so a lot of them are fractured or can be pretty fragile, but I'll show you kind of ways to avoid that and avoid some heartbreak. So with that, let's get right to the first step. All right, so I've got enough agates to fill my barrel. Now you'll notice that none of these agates are really huge. I mean, this is the biggest one. And the rest are all kind of fairly small, and that's just because you don't want them, like the bigger ones tend to crash around in the barrel more, and at least in my experience can fracture your rocks a little bit easier. So they're all kind of the same size, give or take. So I'm just gonna fill the barrel with all these. And I've got a video on how I chose these rocks, or how to choose agates that are best for tumbling. So if you haven't already, you should definitely check that one out. It's got good information, because not every agate will turn out well if you throw it in the tumbler. Alright, so the barrel is about 2/3 to 3/4 full of rock. I'm just going to add some water. And I'm just adding water, basically I'm adding it to the top, or to the bottom of the top layer of rocks. So you can just start to see it a little bit. And then I'll add my I always use 3 tablespoons of grit for each stage, so that's what I'm going to do, and I'll run it for a week. We'll check on them then. So our agates have been on the tumbler for a week, 7 days, whatever. So now it's time to check them and see if any are ready. I highly doubt any of them are, but first I'm going to just dump it all. And I'm not dumping this down the drain because it's not good for the drain. And once the bucket is full, I'll take it outside and dump it out in the yard somewhere. But until the weather warms up a little bit, I am stuck doing it in here. So we might have had our barrel a little bit full. There's a little bit of grit left over. If it'll focus. Alright, I want to pause the video right here for a second, because this isn't actually an issue of overfilling the barrel like I originally thought. This is actually an issue of using too big of grit with too small of a barrel. I think I was using 3670 grit, which means the size of the grit ranges from 36 all the way to 70, so there's bits and pieces all the way within that range. And that's better for like if you have like a 6-pound barrel or a 12-pound barrel. It's fine for that, but with a 3-pound barrel, it's just those bigger pieces are just a little bit too big to get worn down within the week. And so you're left over with some at the end of it, which isn't an issue in the first stage if you're just repeating the first stage, but if you want to move on, you have to clean all that out and make sure that none of the pieces get left over. So that's what's actually going on. In order to avoid that mistake, I would avoid using, if you're using like a smaller barrel, like a 3-pound, or they even make like 1.5-pound barrels, I would avoid using anything bigger than 60 grit. But I think 80 grit or like 60-90 for the first stage is probably just the best size to go with. All right, now we can resume. So now we're just gonna go through each rock and see if they're ready to move on. And what I'm looking for, notice how this one has some pits right there. There's a big crack right there. All of those need to come out of the rock if you want a rock to be all smooth and shiny when it's all done. So any little imperfection like that, this one's got lots of imperfections on the back. So all of those little divots are going to need to come out. That big crack right there. I mean, you certainly can leave them, but then you'll just get rocks that aren't as shiny as they could be. Big divot right there and right there. So all these are just gonna go back in the barrel for another week. Here's an example of what a rock looks like when it's ready to move on. I mean, sure, there's some cracks there, but for the most part, this one's all set to move on. There's no pits or anything. And this is the most important part. If you want the best results, this is how you get them. See that big crack right there? that one's going back in the barrel. Little holes all over the back. So I'm just going through every single rock and seeing if any are ready. And if not, they're going back for another week in the first stage. So I've gone through all of them. This is what the bucket looks like, or the barrel. Since these have been wearing down a little bit over the past week, there's room for a few more. So I'm gonna add that one, got that little one. Then I've got a few that I've started tumbling already, but ran out of room in other barrels for them. So yeah, you want it somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 full. Probably more closer to the 3/4 full, just because, like I said, these are fragile. But yeah, I'm gonna put more water in. Alright, so you can just barely see the water. Then I'm gonna add more. I'm gonna add 3 more tablespoons of grit and then put it back on the tumbler for another week. Alright, these have been tumbling for 2 weeks now. I'm not sure that any of them are going to be ready, but we're just going to do the same thing that we did last week and just go through all of them, see if any of them are ready to move on. This one is not. This one's got a big crack right there. That one you can see has a crack that needs to come out. So if any of these are done, I'll show them to you, so that you can see what one that's all finished looks like. But yeah, these are going back in for another week. Well, I went through all the rocks and none of them were ready to move on quite yet. There might be some next week that are ready to move on, but not 100% sure. So it's pretty much about as full as I want it, but I'm gonna add just a couple more. And then I'm gonna put it back on the tumbler for another week. Alright, so it's been 3 weeks now, and as you can see, it's warm enough where I can actually get outside. So let's see if any of these are ready this week. Alright, so this one's getting really close, but there's just like a little tiny nick right on this corner that I want out. So that one's probably got like a week or 2 left. Now that one's got a little bit on the end there, I think. You can definitely feel some of the spots. I think you can see that little divot there, so that I want that out. So both these are going back in the barrel. That one's definitely got some pits that need to come out still. It's a long process, but if you're patient enough, it's definitely worth the results. You'll be much happier if you wait. That one's really close, but that one's got a big pit in the back. I'm gonna put that one in for another week, but I may decide to take that one out because it's on the back. And the main focus is obviously the banding. So, we'll see what happens with that one. Some of these are just gorgeous. Here's another one that has a couple pits on the back. That one's got a big inside divot there. A bunch more on the back, so that one's got quite a ways to go. This one has a crack right there that I'm gonna try to get out. One on the back too. So I'm just gonna continue going through these. Oh, that's a really nice one. Anyway, I'm gonna just continue going through these, and if there are any that are ready, I'll let you know. Alright, so I feel like a broken record saying this, but again, there's no rocks ready this week. So I'm gonna add a couple more in and put it on for another week. And there are some that are really, really close. So I'm hoping next week we should have the first few that are ready. Alright, so it's been 4 weeks now, basically a month. And I'm really hoping that this week there are some that are ready. So we'll see. Alright, so after going through all of them, I'm happy to say we have our first few that are ready to move on. I've got them all dried off here so you can see what they look like. But they don't have any, I mean this one has some cracks, but this one's so little that by the time those come out, there's not going to be much rock left. And it might be tough to see, but this one has some really beautiful lines on it, so I'm going to just call this one done and move it on. And like same deal with this one has like a big crack running right through almost all of it. A few other smaller cracks running through it. And that's the unfortunate thing about Lake Superior agates, is they're about 1 billion years old, so. And I've traveled quite a way with glaciers and stuff, so. It's hard to find some that are completely unscathed. And then same thing with this one. I could probably tumble that out, but by the time I do, there's not going to be a whole lot left of this rock. And this side looks really nice, so. I can live with those and make sure some of the other ones are extra beautiful. So I'm going to set these 4 aside and then wait for more to get done. Alright, so this week we have 7 of them down, or no, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, 8. So they don't look like much now because they're all dry, but they're going to be really, really beautiful once they're all shined up. So I'm going to set these aside, and then as you can see, our barrel's not as full. So I'm going to add some more. And this week I'm going to add some special kinds of agates. They're not really that special, but I have, this one was in week 3, so the second to last stage, or not week 3, but it was in the 3rd stage, so second to last, and it broke in half. So there's one half, and there's the other half. So sometimes tragedy happens, and it's okay to start over on a rock. and now I've got 2 of them. So those should be done pretty soon since they're already almost done. And then the rest of them, I've got some nodules, and the reason I picked nodules is because they're already pretty round, and they're just interesting to see what's revealed. Some of my coolest agates that I've tumbled have been full nodules that end up revealing some really amazing patterns that would otherwise be hidden. So, I'm gonna fill this with water and grit and put it back on the tumbler for another week. Alright, this week we have 10 rocks that are finished, that are ready to move on. This one here has, kind of tough to see, but there's a couple of holes still in them. But this one, sometimes when you get tubes like that, no matter how deep you go, they don't come out. And I really like this one, so I'm gonna call it just a little bit early. But there'll be a little tiny spot right there that doesn't get shiny, and another one right above my thumbnail there. But I can live with that. And the rest of them are all pretty good. So it is now week 7, and I've already gone through the rocks. And in this pile, these are the ones that are done, or at least that I'm happy with. And in this pile, these are the ones that could probably use at least 1 more week. And I wanted to show the difference, because like some of these have flaws in them, but like this one, it's hard to see. Or no, it's not this one, it's this one. So you see that crack running all the way through? Right there is probably going to be kind of a bad spot. Actually, I can feel it with my nail. But the other side is nice, and that crack runs like almost halfway through the rock. And this is already a pretty small rock to begin with, so if I tumble that away, there's just not going to be any rock left. And I like this one. This one's got some really nice, pretty colors in it. It's got some reds. It's actually got some greens, which are pretty rare. So, and then this one, you can see that little fracture there. That could probably come out in like a week or 2. And then there's also this little divot in there. But I wanted to save this one because it's got some really cool staining in it. So I can live with those 2 little spots not turning out as good, because the rest of the rock is really, really cool. This is one of the halves of that agate that broke. I don't think this one has any flaws in it anymore. Apparently it had a big crack halfway through it. That one's got just a little tiny flaw in it. And so I don't think, oh, that one's got just like a little bit of a divot in it, but I mean, most of these rocks are so small anyway that tumbling them would just reduce them to nothing. So here are some rocks where they have flaws, and I'm gonna put them back in the tumbler. Like this one, see that little spot? That'll come out in probably a week. So next week it will hopefully be ready. And I'm not losing anything by tumbling that out. Same with this, there's that spot and that spot. I mean, you could tumble these, or you could move these on, and I mean, the rest of the rock is gonna get nice and shiny, but you've already gone, what did I say, 7 weeks? So you might as well do the little extra bit and get that out so that you can have just about a perfect rock. one's got that needs to come out. And some of these bigger fractures probably just won't come out. That one just has that little divot. This one's my pillowcase, or pillow. So there's that. And then there's a few up here. And they're kind of easier to see when they're dry. Like this one just has this little fracture there. And that doesn't go very deep into the rock. And the rest of the rock doesn't have any fractures. There's also that little divot too. So this one I'm just gonna tumble out, and since the rest of the rock isn't fractured up, that's one that I want to get all those out so that it looks nice. And that's probably the toughest part, is deciding which rocks are, or which flaws you're okay with leaving in, like on here, and which ones you want to tumble out. And it's personal preference, but I like to get mine as close to perfect as I can get. Well, I've only got 4 this week that are done, but I've got a bunch that are like really close, so in the next couple of weeks we should have quite a few more that are done with the first stage. Well, week 9 was really good to us. We got a lot done. I think there's 15 of them. A few of them, like this big one kind of on my middle finger there, you can see has a bit of a bad spot, but that's just not going to come out, and it has some cool staining on it. I don't know how well that shows up, but it's got some cool yellow in it, and I don't want to tumble that out. I'd rather just have that little bad spot than lose the cool yellow staining. This big one on my pinky here is a little bit worrisome to me because it's kind of got an inside curve on it, but I think it's shallow enough where it's still going to get polished. But yeah, the rest of these are all pretty good. I think there's one other that's like a tube agate that has, oh yeah, this other one that's on my pinky here has some bad spots there. But those are just, you could tumble through the whole rock, but because that tube is a softer mineral, it's just never going to shine up. So I can live with those. And overall, I think this was a really good week. With all those rocks getting done, the barrel's looking a little empty. So we're going to be needing to add quite a few rocks this week. And I've got those set aside here. This is one that I cut in half, I think for a video. So that should be interesting. And it shouldn't take too long since the outside is already almost completely round. So yeah, those won't take very long. This one I call my Crazy Lace Lake Superior agate just because it has so many interesting designs in it. I found this one in a stream. Really excited to see how that one turns out. This week I've got some bigger rocks in here, or I'll be putting some bigger rocks in here. And I feel comfortable doing that because you'll notice that most of these rocks are fairly small. And there's a few bigger ones in there. But you want to be careful and make sure you don't add too many and too big of rocks, because they'll crash around and bang into each other. So I'm not doing anything much bigger than that. I apologize for the dirty hands, but I was doing some work on the rock tumbler. Anyway, this is what we have done this week. It probably won't be too many more weeks before we're ready to move on to the second stage. Alright, these are the rocks that are done this week. And then I also wanted to show, sometimes chips do happen. Looks like there's 3 of them in there. That one's a pretty big chip. Not sure which one that came off of, but you know, it's better for it to happen in the first stage rather than like at the end of the third stage or even in the last stage. So there's not a lot we can do about it, but like I said, it's better to have it happen now rather than later on in the tumble. Alright, so this is what's done this week. Nothing too exciting. On this bigger one here, you can see that it has a couple of big cracks in it, but that little one I could probably tumble out, but that bigger one is still going to be there. So I'm just going to call that one. There aren't any like divots in it or anything. And then this one also has a crack in it, but the rest of them are looking pretty good. This one was an agate, probably still is an agate, but a lot of quartz on it. I probably tumbled most of the outer husk away, and that'll happen sometimes, but it looks like there's still some more chalcedony on the end here. But this one's gonna look a lot more like quartz when it's done. This week I also wanted to show this one, which is, I could probably call this one done, but I'm not going to yet. And that's because underneath the surface here, I can see some pretty neat water level banding. And I'd like to expose that a little bit more. Plus there's kind of this stuff going on on the bottom, I guess. But yeah, I just want to expose those bands a little bit more. Well, I got quite a few little ones done this week. It's hard to tell because they're all dry right now, but that one's got some neat bands in it. And this one is mostly quartz, so I'm calling this one already. It's also really round on the back. But yeah, unfortunately, we also had some tragedy this week. Sad day. This one was getting really close to being done, and the end blew off. But we can put that back in, and hopefully, I mean, it does have some more cracks in it, so we'll see. But I'm hoping, because it's still a pretty neat agate, to still get a nice tumbled rock out of it. But yeah, sometimes sad stuff like that happens, and there's not a lot you can do about it. Alright, these are the rocks that are done this week. Alright, these are the rocks that are done this week. You'll see that this one here, besides having a couple holes in it, in one of those holes you'll see that there's a little piece of grit stuck in there. That's going to need to come out before I move it on to the next stage. So I'm going to try to use like a toothpick to get that out. Or maybe one of my mom's sewing needles. This one here has a hole in it, but I really love the rest of the rock. And I'd rather have a bigger rest of this rock with one big hole in it than a smaller rock with no hole in it. That's kind of the case with a few of these. There's a few of them that just have like a deeper hole that I could tumble out, but would take even longer and would lose a good portion of the rock. So I guess it's all what you can live with. Alright, I thought this week we'd check to see how close we are to moving on. I really have no idea what week it is anymore. I want to say maybe around 16. It's been a while. So let's see where we're at here. I've been keeping them just in this Tupperware day. So we're actually getting pretty close. We've got, this barrel is about half full, or if you're a pessimist, it's about half empty. We probably want it to like there. I don't know, it's hard to tell from this camera angle. Yeah, we just want it a little bit higher. We're gonna be putting some ceramic media in there too to help cushion things. So it doesn't need to be too much fuller. Something like right there. So we're gonna have a few more weeks to go anyway, but we're getting close. All right, these are the rocks that are done this week. I'm really excited for this one. That one's gonna be really, really cool when it's done. Because even dry after the first stage, it looks awesome. I call this one my Crazy Lace Lake Superior agate, because it reminds me of a crazy lace agate. It's got a couple of cracks, and then there's like that bad spot, and then a couple of other bad spots on it, but I'd much rather save the patterns here. And then this one here, the back is just not gonna turn out great, but the rest of it will be very nice. So when I display this one, I will display it like that. All right, this week is special for a couple of reasons. One, we got a lot of rocks done. Oops, that one has a bit of a chip in it. That one I'm gonna put back, but it's still a special week because we have enough rocks to move on to the next stage, even though I'm putting this one back. So let me change locations and I will show you what to do for that. All right, we are officially ready to move on to the second stage. This is the same barrel that I was using before. It's still wet because I just finished cleaning it out. There was some grit stuck in the bottom. And if you're using the same barrel, you want to make sure that it's clean between stages. And it doesn't matter so much if you're running like the first stage and there's a little bit of grit left over, because then you'll just use that up in the next week. But this one, since it's a finer grit, you'll want to make sure that it's extra clean. So we've got all of our stuff set out here. We've got our rocks that are ready. This is ceramic media. I bought it at the rock shed, same place where I got the grit. And these just help cushion things when they're tumbling around in there. So yeah, good to have that. And then we have our grit for stage 2. And this is 220 Silicon Carbide. So it's the same material as the stuff we were using in the first stage, but it's a little bit finer. And I've got a measuring spoon. So first things first, we're gonna take our rocks. We're just gonna put them in the barrel. Try to be pretty gentle when you're dropping them in, because you don't want them to break against each other or smash against each other and break. All right, so that comes up to about, if we do the really scientific method of measuring it with our finger, that comes up to about there. So we're gonna put some ceramic media in there to help cushion things. It's not super important how much you put in. Oops, dropped a bunch. I'll probably fill this a little bit more than, or really close to like 3/4 full. If you kind of give it a shake, it sort of settles everything around. All right, I've got it sitting about where I want. Might be just a hair full, but I think it'll be all right. So what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna take 3 tablespoons of this, or at least close to tablespoons. It doesn't have to be exact. Just somewhere between like 2 and 3. All right. And then the final step is it just needs some water. So I'm gonna do that because where the sink is not a great filming spot. And it's just filling it with water. It's not all that riveting. All right, and just like that, it's got water in it. I filled it the same way I have been for the first stage, where it's just like, you can just start to see it, or to the bottom of the top layer of rocks. So I'm gonna put the lid on, and it's gonna go on the tumbler for 7 days. And we will check on it then. Hi everyone, welcome to the dungeon. This is where I clean my rocks. And this has been running for a week now, and it's ready for the next stage. So let me get these rinsed off and we'll take a look at a few of them to see how they're coming along. All right, so they look really good right now because they're wet. So I picked one to dry off to show you what that looks like. So not quite shiny yet, but that's okay, we still have 2 more stages to go. So I have them all rinsed off now, and I've got the barrel filled with water, but before we put the stage 3 grit in, I'm gonna first put in some borax. So I'm gonna take 2 tablespoons of that, or about 2 tablespoons, it doesn't have to be exact. And I'm just gonna run that for, I'll end up running it for a day because I work kind of late tonight and don't want to change that out. But I usually run it anywhere from like 4 to 24 hours. And all this does is it's gonna clean up any grit that's left over or any gunk that's still on the rocks. And just make sure we don't have any contamination when we go to the 3rd stage, and then we'll do it again after that stage and then move it on to the last stage. Funny story, I accidentally forgot about this. So this burnishing stage has gone on a little bit extra. It's gone 2 days instead of, usually I just do it for like 6 hours or half a day. But it doesn't hurt anything to leave it extra. It's kind of interesting now. The rocks are actually shiny. This is completely dry and it's got a bit of a gloss to it. So I'm not really sure why that happens. The borax doesn't have like any polishing compound to it. It's just soap. But there's a shine to it. But we're gonna get these, I mean, that's an okay shine. We're gonna get these to a mirror finish, so. And the next step is to do stage 3. Now this is where we switch from silicon carbide, or silica carbide? Silicon carbide. I can never remember. Silica is what agates are made of. Silicon carbide is the polishing stuff. But this is not silicon carbide. This is aluminum oxide. And we're using this now because this is better at polishing. When it breaks down into little round pieces, whereas the silicon carbide breaks down into little angular pieces, so it's better for cutting and grinding. This is 500 grit, and again I'm going to use 3 tablespoons. Again, doesn't have to be like exact, just kind of close. And this one we're going to run for 10 days. I should mention I already have the water in here. You can kind of see it there. And I'm filling it with the same amount of water that I have been for everything. All right, now you just put the lid back on. And I'm gonna put it back on the tumbler for 10 days. All right, welcome back to the dungeon. It's been 10 days now, and they should be ready to move on to the next stage. Alright, let me dry one of these off. Normally you probably don't want to do that in case there's any grit still stuck in them, because that grit will dry in there like concrete. But this is what they look like after stage 3. If my camera will focus. Come on, there we go. So you can see it's starting to get just a little bit of a shine. But once we're done with this last stage, these will have a mirror finish and just be really beautiful. So before we start the last stage though, I'm going to do another burnishing stage. So that's 2 scoops or 2 tablespoons of borax. I'm going to run that for about a day or half a day. So it'll end up being like 12 hours if I don't forget this time. But yeah, these are starting to get, I don't know why the camera won't focus. It's got a matte shine on it now. Here's what the agates look like after the burnish. It's got a bit more of a gloss, but we can do a mirror finish after this last stage. Alright, so just like every other stage, I've got the water filled to the bottom of the top layer of rocks. And I've gotten pretty good at saying that now. And we're gonna just use 3 tablespoons again. And this time the grit that we're using is aluminum oxide polish. And you can get that along with all the other stuff that I've used for this video at the Rock Shed. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, I just really like them. So we're just gonna add our 3 scoops and then we're gonna run it for 2 weeks. And this is gonna be the longest 2 weeks of this whole process. But I think we're gonna be very pleased with the results. All right, this has been running for 2 weeks and they should be done now. So I'm gonna do one final burnish, but it should be shiny now. All right, that is completely dry. It's got an excellent shine on it. I think this is a successful batch. But like I said, I'm gonna do one more burnishing stage just to make sure like all the cracks in the rocks are clean and all that stuff. So I'm gonna run it with 2 tablespoons of borax for, I don't know, I'm gonna run it for the day while I'm at work. So that'll be 9 hours or so. All right, after many, many weeks, it's finally time to take a look at these. They're all finished. They're all done with the final burnishing stage, although I didn't show me rinsing those off. But this tutorial is long enough as is, so I'm not gonna delay it any further. Let's take a look at how these turned out. And they turned out very well. These are completely dry. Some rock tumbling tutorials will show the finished result still wet. And of course they'll look good when they're still wet. I mean, even in the first stage they looked good while they were wet. But yeah, these are completely dry. And I think it was well worth the efforts. Here, I'll show the one that I've been showing throughout the whole process. And it's just beautiful. Don't mind the fingerprints on it. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful. I put a ton of time and effort into it, not just in tumbling the rocks, but also getting all the footage, editing it all, keeping track of it all over however many months. So thank you so much for watching and subscribing and leaving all those kind comments. I really appreciate that. Next week, I will show the rest of these up close and in much better detail. So stay tuned for that. Again, thank you so much for watching.